What is up, you guys? Matt McKeever sitting down with Alfonso from JAAG Properties, and in this video we're just going to discuss high level what is rent to own. And so I'll maybe just frame it with some of my experiences, but rent to own for me was this strategy that usually I only stumbled across, until recently at least, in older books. So it seemed like it was popular in the 80s or 90s. When I talked to someone, there's always like someone's uncle or aunt had done rent to own, but I'd never met someone that did rent to own until the last few years, until I started really taking real estate networking seriously. And still, until I started going out to all the meetup groups, I hadn't met a lot of rent to own operators. So I thought, why not sit down with JAAG Properties, who've done 100 plus rent to owns, and find out what is rent to own and why do we hear so many different conflicting stories or versions of what rent to own is?
For sure, and I love how you say that is, someone's aunt or someone's friend or someone that they knew that you knew, and it's I kind of say it's like the Sasquatch of the real estate world, where it's been heard of but not exactly sure what it is. So essentially, rent to own in its truest form is really helping somebody that can't qualify for a mortgage or can't qualify to buy a property today, essentially put them through a program over typically 3 years to help them qualify for a mortgage so that they can own their own house. From the investor side, JAAG Properties buys the house, partners with joint venture partners on these properties, works the program with the tenant buyer to make sure that they're fixing their credit, their income, or their down payment so that they can qualify throughout the program. We're purchasing the home as a normal purchase and really helping people get into their houses. That's like in its simplest form.
So I don't know if you can shed some light on this, but to me it seems like in the 80s is when rent to own started really getting a lot of traction, or at least that's when it seemed to start hitting the speaking circuit and stuff, and when we started to see a lot of, I think, gurus and experts talking on it. Do you know much about where rent to owns originated and how that evolved?
Again, and even earlier than that, we've actually worked with some brokers in the local area here in London that they bought their original house in the 70s through a rent to own program. But again, I think it had something to do with the high interest rates, right?
Yes.
Not being able to qualify and purchase your home. So people were buying homes and calling them rent to own. But essentially, without a clear, defined exit out to say, okay, Matt, I'll buy the house for you. You rent it. Let me know when you can own it. And it's on you to go and figure that out on your own, to save up, to whatever, to have the funds, the credit, and the income to qualify for that property. Versus now, the way that we approach it and how it's evolved is, here's a clear strategy right from A, B, C, D, right throughout the program of this is why you don't qualify, and we educate the tenant buyer and the client of why they're not qualifying today, what they need to do in that set period of time to qualify for the property, and then essentially help them qualify with our mortgage team and our credit team to have them qualify for the property. We also have a credit coach that really talks about the mindset of money and how to budget, how to properly set aside what to do for different things that come up in your life. As everybody knows, like, shit happens, right? So what do you need to budget for? What do you need to have saved for? And basically, a home is one of the most important things in your life, an investment, especially if you have a family, a safe place for them to live and sleep. So that's what we're doing, is educating people, showing them how they can improve their credit. That was the misnomer or the negative things that you hear about rent to own, is because there's that piece is missing. It's that, let me know when you can own it. Oh, now it's worth this much and I'm going to sell it to you for this much. No, this is a clear define that this is a 3-year program, step by step, following through with that client and that tenant buyer, and then the investors and us as well too, buying the properties, helping them do that.
Awesome. So essentially, breaking it down for the audience, in most rent to owns, there's kind of 3 parties or stakeholders involved. So there's like the facilitator or the rent to own. Is that the right term?
Let's call them JAAG Properties.
JAAG Properties, yeah. So we have the facilitator, JAAG Properties. Then we have like the aspiring home buyer or the client.
Yep, we like to use the term tenant buyer.
The tenant buyer.
Yep.
And then third, we have like a investor.
Yep, a joint venture partner or an investor. We look at them as partners.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so essentially what's happening is this investor has some money or some credit availability, and they're partnering with the facilitator or the operator, JAAG, and they're coming together and essentially finding a home for that person? Or I've heard some people talk about there's two kind of approaches to rent to own. Can you shed some light on that?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right when you say that we do partner together, and there are primarily two popular strategies in the rent-to-own world. Is the tenant first, is what we use, and then there's the property first approach. So I'm going to speak to what we know about the client first approach.
Yeah.
Is basically we're looking at that client, vetting that client, understanding their situation today of why they can't qualify, and putting those things in place with our credit team and our credit coaching to get that fixed. Once we know that, then basically they have a budget. They can go out and look for a home based on the criteria and the information that they've given us. So they know that they can go buy a house, and then they're going to qualify for that house at the end of the property. And they get to choose the property based on their specific needs, requirements, and their qualifying ability and the things that they're going to do to fix it. So for the property first approach, people own the property and they're looking for a tenant that eventually will own that house. It's a couple more pieces to line up in terms of they also have to qualify for the price that the owner of the property wants as well too. But yeah, both strategies work. We prefer the client first because they have a sense of ownership. Once we've qualified them and set that budget, they can go out and look for any house that's for sale on the market, off market, on market, MLS, wherever they can find it in the areas, the cities, the little pockets of towns that they want to be in. So they technically are choosing the house that they're going to live in and own, right? So they have that attachment to it, and it makes for a more successful program as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I've definitely, from the operators I've spoken to, the operators that are focused on the tenant first or the tenant buyer first, it makes a lot more sense to me, guys, when I sit down and think about it, because naturally it feels like that tenant buyer will have more commitment if they're selecting the property themselves. It also feels like you're really investing in the person and the relationship with that person and building that out to make sure that you really trust that all this is going to come together. Where I think with the property first, what one of my fears would be is that your tenant buyer, they might just say yes to it because they want a property so bad, but that property is not really right for them. Over the course of a couple of years, that's really going to come to the surface and become an issue.
Absolutely, and we see that over and over again when the clients, they love their homes. They love their homes. They feel that sense of home ownership. When we go out and we follow up with our clients, typically once every 3 months or so, either myself, my business partner, or someone from our team is actually going and visiting these properties, and we're invited into their homes and and to have dinner with us, and please come here, let's have a coffee, sit down, and it's a true partnership all the way around with our investors as well as our tenant buyers, because like you said, you're investing in that person. We get to know their families, their stories, what happened in their lives, to get to the situation where they needed to utilize a rent-to-own program to get their financial status back in shape, right? So yeah, that's the part too, is that we really get to help these people and see them progress. Yes, we are buying, what do they call it, bricks and sticks, and you're buying houses and properties, and that's important in how you're buying them. Then that's a whole nother level of analysis when we're actually going through the buying process. But yeah, it does center and revolve around the client, where yeah, it does make for, again, a more successful program when we do that.
Yeah, I think that's just, it feels like a better fit to me, where you're aligning everyone's interest a lot better with the tenant first process. And I think that ties in well into maybe some of the misconceptions or some of the previous experiences people have had with rent-to-own, because there's definitely, if you go out to the general public, it feels like there's the sense of predatory, right? And so a lot of people, I think in the 80s and 90s in particular, experienced that, where there's a lot of predatory practices. And I think, again, they weren't very focused on actually helping the tenant, building out a proper process or plan to get them from A to B. And where B in this case is actually buying the home and owning the home.
That's right. And again, and we talk about it a lot through, through the programs that we have now, bringing on like a financial advisor, a money coach, is that we're not taught that when we're when we're growing up. How to budget, how to take care of your finances, and that's the key piece in all of this, right? There's all finite numbers, but it's the willingness. If you want to own your house, there's going to you're going to have to do some things that are tough, that are hard. You're going to have to, you know, so, and we can show you, it's like a training program as well. It's like a home ownership and training, really, at the end of the day, right? And for the investors, that's what we see too, is that we're making a return on our money, and these investments are sound investments, but we're also helping people. And that's the great part as well too, that you can do both. They don't need to be mutually exclusive.
So yeah, that's perfect. And that's something I'd love to build upon, is this focus on the client first process. It feels like you're really aligning everyone's interest is much more aligned with the client first, in my opinion. So I'd love to dive into it and maybe use JAAG Properties as an example. What sort of success rate are you seeing with your client buyers? What can people expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So out of the 100 or so, 100 plus properties that we've done, there's less than three, actually three exactly, that the client is not in the home currently, or it did not purchase the home. And what we find is because more of the personal reasons. In one case, there was a divorce and a separation. In another example, the individual got hurt and couldn't work anymore and couldn't afford for the payments anymore. But what we really focus on is that, what is the sustainability? Nobody can predict the future, but we can look at, you know, reasonable metrics that is going to dictate if it is going to be successful. How long have they been working at their jobs? You know, how has there been their credit? Why did they claim for bankruptcy? Was there a personal situation? Right? It's really delving into those things, and our credit team takes a look at their files, but we're also getting to know the people as well too. So again, yes, with the client, it is so important to understand the full picture. We can't predict the future of what's going to happen, but we have so many that are on track. We have closed out, I think it's 29 properties now that we have sold back to our clients, right? The rest are currently in operation, either in year 1, 2, or 3, and are looking on track. Like when we look at our monthly statements or quarterly statements, looking at that, there's none on the radar that we're like, oh well, what's going on? They're pretty stable, they're fantastic, and that again is to our vetting process. To do like one deal, we probably say no to like 15 to 20 applications, right? So it's really refining that and kind of sifting through and putting realistic expectations for that client.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that, for those of us that are already in real estate investing but maybe haven't dabbled with rent to own, it sounds like it's still, at the end of the day, it really comes down to that vetting process, to making sure you're finding the right tenant. In this case, it's a tenant buyer, but I think that only emphasizes more so the importance of finding the right tenant, right? Especially when you're kind of client first or person oriented first.
Correct. And you know what? There's three metrics, right? There's the credit score, there's down payment, and there's income. Those three numbers, you can find, they're finite, they're exact for each individual person. They change, they move, but they are pretty much stable. The fourth that I like to think that we use is basically the willingness to become a homeowner. It's doing those things that become a homeowner. You have to change your furnace filters. You have to, shut your water. You have to do maintenance around your house. You have to take care of things. Things break in houses. You have to take care of them. So it's hard to put a finite number on that. We think we have a pretty good way of analyzing it through different methods and things that we do, and just through our experiences of what we've seen, and we see patterns that, well, this person said this thing, and then they said the same thing, and they said the same thing, and well, look, all three things happened, right? And gaining that experience. So it's really like, it's investing in the people and the clients, and just being secure that in the worst case scenario, there is a property. We do have real estate. We're still in real estate. There is something there, but it's long before we get to the house. We're really making sure that client is put in the best possible position that they are going to qualify. If they're not, and most of the time they want more, or they want to bite off more that they can chew, and we're kind of holding them back to say, no, you need something that's going to actually put you back in a financial position, not make you worse off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. So just high level, guys, to kind of summarize for us, with most rent-to-owns, we're going to have kind of three parties or three stakeholders involved. So we have the facilitator, in this case that's JAAG Properties, then we have the client tenant buyer, then we have a third investor who's going to partner with JAAG Properties on that specific deal. So the way we kind of view rent-to-owns is there's really two big different stories going on there. So we're actually going to break out this video into two other sections. One focused just on that tenant buyer and kind of discussing things from the tenant buyer's perspective. Then we're also going to discuss what the investor can expect and kind of what they should be looking for in a facilitator as well. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed what I'm trying to do with my YouTube channel, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel, And otherwise, before we wrap up, where can people reach out if they want to learn more about Alfonso or JAAG Properties?
Yeah, get onto the website, jaagproperties.com. That's where you can find us, all the information. We have a great cartoon video on there. Definitely get on there and watch that as well too. That's on the website.
Awesome. Well, until next time, guys, remember, making money is a team sport. There's more than enough money in this world for us to all make it, but if you're not saving it, I mean, like, what's the point? Thanks, guys. Bye.